skipping some verses through there. See, several of you have your Bibles open, so I will just cue you as to what verse I'm going to get to. We're going to start with verse 1 and 2. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Now in verse 7. It is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons, for what son is there whom his father does not discipline? Verse 11. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant. Later, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Verse 15. See to it that no one fail to obtain the grace of God, and that no root of bitterness spring up and cause trouble, and by it the many become defiled. That no one be immoral or irreligious like Esau, who sold his birthright for a single meal. And now verse 25. See that you do not refuse him who is speaking, and the one who is speaking is Jesus from heaven. For if they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, and that voice was Moses, much less shall we escape if we reject him who warns from heaven. His voice then shook the earth, but now he has promised, yet once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. That phrase, yet once more, indicates the removal of what is shaken as of what has been made, in order that what cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, and thus let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. All Saints' Day, that's the day that is set aside, has been historically set aside by the church to remember those who have died, to remember that we too shall die. Mostly in our culture, it has come to be reduced to All Saints' Eve, Halloween, the night before All Saints' Day, which actually was last Tuesday. But today is All Saints' Sunday, as it is celebrated throughout Christendom. It's not a real popular topic, you know. It's not exactly feel-good time, is it? When we have to deal with matters like death, others, and our own. And yet, our faith begins and just about ends right there. The body and the blood, every Sunday we talk about crucifixion, resurrection. It is the bedrock of our faith. If we cannot come face to face with the reality of death, we cannot really know what our faith is about. St. Paul said as much in his great resurrection chapter in 1 Corinthians 15. If Christ has not been raised from the dead, we are of all men most to be pitied. It begins and it ends right there. As a matter of fact, all religion, not just the Christian religion, begins and ends right there. Even Buddhism, which is arguably not even a religion, a formal religion by definition, begins with the first noble truth. Life is suffering. That's where it begins. The Buddha goes forth from his sheltered life, and one of the first things he discovers is people die. He never knew that before, because it had been kept from him. Suddenly it changed his life. So from the ancient funeral pyres of old to the modern day funeral parlors, we come face to face with those questions and those issues that rush at us at the most crucial times of our lives. Why did this person have to die? Where are they now? Will they ever come back? What's happening to them? Why did it have to happen to me? Those are just the universal questions. Hebrews, the author of the book of Hebrews, describes it as a shaking of the foundations. Have you ever been in an earthquake? It pretty much describes the experience of losing someone significant, someone close to you. You're not sure of your footing anymore. It's like the world is turned upside down. You're not sure where to go next, how to react, what to do. It has changed your life forever. It will never be the same. The shaking of the foundations. But what this author in Hebrews says to us is that a time of death becomes a time of shaking, but it's not an unproductive time of shaking. It is almost like a time of sifting. So that he says, it indicates the removal of what is shaken, that is, of what has been made, in order that what cannot be shaken will remain. We have this shaking so that it can shake out all of that stuff that is contingent, that stuff that's passing away, that stuff that is temporal and unnecessary anyway, so that what we are left with, the residue of it all, is what can never be shaken. It's like Jesus was right. Great commandment, love God, love your neighbor. Almost nothing else matters. Basically what he said. When you shake it all out, what have you got? All that stuff we worry about, all that stuff we give our lives to, all that going to work and getting paid, buying this and worrying about that. St. Paul said it. Now faith, hope, and love abide. Nothing else abides. And the greatest of these is love. So what happens in the shaking of the foundations? What happens in this time of loss and of this time of death? Well, he talks about a couple of things in this chapter. The first thing that stands out is community. We are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. He's talking about those, of course, who have predeceased us, people who are already gone. But if you go back just one verse, he basically talks about how we join with them. We complete what was missing in their faith. And in a sense, people who come after us and will grieve our loss will complete what has been lacking in our faith. We are a part of this great community of people who experience loss and of people who will actually die, or we too shall die. And we're a part of this great community. Somebody said there's nothing any more disheartening than a lonely struggle. To be alone with what you have to deal with. Well, the Scriptures teach us we don't have to be alone in our time of death. After my wife died a few years ago, I got into a grief support group. Semicircle of people that met every week. Everybody had had a significant loss. Most had lost spouses, but I'm recalling a woman who had lost a son, another woman who lost her mother, she was very close to. I have never felt freer in my life. There was something about that sense of community. I knew that whatever I said was going to be understood by everybody in that room. That is the most freeing thing you can imagine. Because when you're outside of a group like that, you're not free. I mean, I had lots of people who would say to me, "Oh, how are you doing?" And what they wanted me to say, I knew what they wanted me to say. Right, Carrie? They wanted me to say, "Well, I'm doing really well." And then they quickly would say, "Oh, that's good." And then they would leave fast. Nobody really wanted to know what that was like. Why? Because death scares us. It scares us. We don't want to think about it. We don't want to talk about it. The Jews have a custom that has always amazed me. I've only heard about it, called sitting Shiva. You ever heard of that? They'll have X number of days of mourning. And people will come to the house and they will come with food. We do that, right? We know how to do that. Come with food, but they don't say anything. They will just come and sit in silence and in quiet, because after all, what can you say? There aren't that many words, but the presence of other people, who by their presence say, I care, I love, I'm here, I mourn with you. Community, very significant about community. The second thing he talks about is discipline. He says really, grief, hardship, the experience of losing someone, is really a discipline in life. It's a discipline of faith. There again, we don't much care for discipline. Whether it's getting a scolding from our parents or whether it's practicing piano. But you really don't ever get much of anywhere without practicing some form of discipline. Whether it's in the arts or some form of scholarship or being a craftsman. It takes a great deal of effort to arrive at that skill. And we call that discipline. The ability to stay with it. And that's what the author of Hebrews talks about. We've got to stay with it. He says, for the moment, all discipline seems painful. It's not pleasant. But later it yields a peaceful fruit of righteousness. He says, see to it that no one fail to obtain God's grace. And that's what you're wanting, the grace of God. And that no root of bitterness spring up. No root of bitterness. One of the real pitfalls of grieving is bitterness. And you can apply that to any kind of loss, not just the loss of a loved one, or the loss of a job. You can just become bitter about the whole circumstance. Why does this sort of thing have to happen to me? We say. And then he says, don't be like Esau, who sold his whole birthright for a single meal. Esau got caught up in the immediacy of the circumstance and failed to see the big picture, and it cost him greatly. It's the same way with us in our grieving. We get so caught up in the immediacy of it that we fail to see the big picture of our faith. We can't give up on our faith in time of hardship and suffering and grief, even though it'll feel like it at times. And so it is like a shaking of the foundations. That's what he talks about. It is a real sifting of everything so that you get down to what is most important and most significant in your life. I'll even go so far as to say I don't think anyone can really mature in their faith until they have come face to face with an extremely significant loss in their life. That's why we typically say it's only older adults who are wise. Because it simply takes time and experience to get to that. I again, I'll call on my own experience when my wife died. I found myself walking through the house. I would go into every room. I didn't know why I did these things. I would go into the rooms of the house that nobody ever went in, the guest bedroom. That bathroom on the other end of the house that nobody cares about. Just go in there. Walk around. And it finally dawned on me that I was looking for her. I thought, maybe this is a bad dream. Maybe she got lost. I'll go search for her. Maybe I'll find her. I remember taking long walks in the tree-lined streets of my neighborhood. I would just walk and walk and walk. And I remember the big issue that I kept trying to grab hold of was, is she conscious? What does she know? Can she see me? Does she know what I'm thinking? And really what I was trying to do, I think, was try to make sense out of what I really believe about life after death. And I'm talking about what I really believe. I know what the church says. I know all that stuff. I got a PhD in it. I know all about heaven and I know all that stuff. Don't try to tell me that I did it wrong or anything like that. But when you meet it face to face, suddenly just what other people have said or what's written in the books, it has got to get filtered in here. Where we live and breathe and have got to keep going. Consciousness. Is she conscious? Her name was Marilyn Mays. Is there a Marilyn Mays anywhere? And I thought and I wrestled, prayed about it. And one day I was watering houseplants. And as I watered them, I turned the container. Just like I almost always do. Why? Because those leaves, they go right over towards the window, right? And so if you never turn the thing, the whole plant is just, it's all over just on one side. You got to turn it so it kind of grows even. I've done this all my life. And just all of a sudden it struck me. That is consciousness. That's what that is. That plant knows. That plant knows where the light is, it knows where the warmth is, and it goes there. It's conscious. I don't understand. It's not any kind of consciousness I understand. It's not human consciousness. And then the more I got to thinking about it, I thought, this is a lot bigger than me. This might even have to do with eternity. Yeah, she's conscious. She, I can't even use the word she. Yes, there is consciousness there, but it's the very consciousness of God. It's the very consciousness of the love of God in Christ that knows no boundaries, that knows not the limitations of these bodies. Yes, there's consciousness, but it's not. Jesus said, there's no marriage in heaven. You're trying to limit it to what you know. It's not going to work that way. And that's why we say that when we die and experience resurrection, whatever we experience there is so much greater and so far beyond what we know here that we can't even think of. We don't even know about it. NPR the other day that scientists have discovered that the universe is still expanding. The thing is just going and going and going. There doesn't seem to be any end to this thing. It's multiplying out there. And it is just beyond all knowing. It is forever. It is eternal. I've always loved this passage, which is also one of the readings for All Saints' Day. And God himself will be with them. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have all passed away. It's all passed away. Faith, hope, and love abide, these three. But the greatest of